The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with raised lettering that read, Thorne and Vale, Attorneys at Law. My name appeared beneath in elegant black script, Miss Ina Reyes, a font too refined to ever belong to anything ordinary. I held it briefly before breaking the seal, though I already knew its contents. No one had told me outright, but the morning Grandpa died, something shifted inside me, like the hinge of an old door finally snapping loose. At breakfast, my mother announced it with her usual clipped certainty. Grayson's will is scheduled for next week. It's just procedure, of course, since Selena is the primary beneficiary. Don't bother dressing up for disappointment. I didn't reply. Long ago, I'd learned that debating with her was like throwing words into a bottomless well. They never returned. The letter confirmed her statement. There would be a formal reading, and attendance was requested. My finger lingered over the date and time, though one line caught me harder than the rest. You have been named among the interested parties. I set the paper beside my coffee, its steam curling through the printed lines. I could almost hear my father's voice echoing inside my head. Don't embarrass yourself by showing up for something you were never part of. They never intended cruelty, not directly, but absence of faith can pierce deeper than any insult. I wasn't the star, I wasn't Selena, and I never had been. Yet I thought of Grandpa's porch, of the afternoon he placed an old book in my lap and told me, the ones who stay are the ones who sit with you in silence. It had never been about inheritance. I expected no money, no recognition, not even acknowledgement. Still, I folded the letter neatly, tucked it into my coat, and circled the date on my calendar. I might not be meant to matter in that room, but I would be present in it. As children, Selena's name filled every hallway of our house, stitched into the wallpaper itself. Selena earned first chair in orchestra. Selena's teacher says she's gifted. Selena's audition was flawless. Our parents spoke of her as if she already belonged to the world of the extraordinary, as though everything she touched turned brilliant. I didn't resent her, not truly. I simply learned how to live in the quiet between her spotlight. While she stood on stages and smiled for cameras, I claimed the back steps with a book, or the garage with Grandpa's puzzle boxes. Once, when my mother caught me reading at the dinner table, she said, "Why don't you try joining the world for once?" I tried, but it never lasted. I wasn't loud enough, dazzling enough, Selena enough. Grandpa was the only one who never asked me to be more. He would slip me little things, an old compass, a cracked globe, a trail map he never managed to hike. "See where this takes you," he'd say, and I'd trace routes across faraway places, feeling like maybe he understood how my mind wandered. He never called me special. He didn't need to. The last time I saw him was an early October Sunday. I had brought him a tin of tea from a downtown shop, bergamot with dried orange peel. Without asking, he brewed 2 mugs, and we sat together on his porch while leaves scattered across the yard. Silence came easily between us, the kind that needed no fixing. No one knew I'd visited. There were no photos, no mention. He hadn't spoken about the will or anything of importance at all. But when I left, he clasped my hand and told me, "You always show up without needing to be seen." That's rarer than you think. It stayed with me, not as praise, but as permission, to keep showing up, even unseen. Now, laying out a plain black dress and slipping my worn coat into my bag, I felt no importance, no claim to legacy. Yet something steadier than entitlement urged me forward. Not for my parents, not even for myself. For him. The chapel stood at the top of a frost-coated hill, stone walls glinting in morning ice. I arrived just before the service, my coat smelling faintly of cedar. The wind bit through my sleeves as I stepped inside. Selena was already there, wrapped in sleek silk and balancing on impossible heels. People gathered around her as though she were the widow, not the granddaughter. She didn't acknowledge me, perhaps didn't notice or chose not to. I nodded to the usher. "I'm here for Grayson Reyes." He hesitated, then pointed toward the side aisle. "You may sit there." The pews were filled with familiar but distant faces, neighbors, family friends, firm associates. My parents occupied the second row, Selena between them, while my mother leaned close to whisper in her ear. I found an empty spot near the back, alone. Behind me, someone muttered, "Why is she here?" Another voice answered, "I thought she cut ties years ago." I didn't turn. Their words passed over me like cold wind through trees. At the front stood the urn, small and dark, bearing no resemblance to the man I remembered. A framed photograph showed Grandpa outside his cabin, work gloves on, smiling like he wasn't supposed to. The pastor spoke of legacy, of faith, but my gaze never left that photograph. I remembered the porch, the tea, the unspoken ease. Grief takes strange shapes. Selina entered as though she owned the space, her coat folded neatly over her arm, clutch swinging from her wrist. "This is only formality," she said loudly enough for me to hear. Grandpa knew who deserved what. My parents took their seats beside her. My mother's mouth pressed into that tight line she wore at weddings and trials, part pride, part performance. I chose a chair near the window, apart from their cluster. Then Mr. Thorne entered, a file under his arm, and greeted us with a nod. "Thank you for coming. I'll begin with the official reading of Grayson Reyes's will, dated June 12th of last year." Selina tilted her chin, composed as if she already knew her role. To my granddaughter, Selina Reyes, Thorne read, "I leave the Aspen Chalet with all furnishings and the sum of $300,000 to be dispersed within 60 days of probate." Her smile widened, not with surprise but with confirmation. She glanced at our parents, who gave the kind of small nods reserved for expectations fulfilled. Thorne turned a page. The air shifted, subtly, imperceptibly, like the room itself inhaled and held the breath. Selina smirked, my mother avoided my eyes, and silence implied the obvious, that was all. My name would not be spoken, but then Thorne cleared his throat. "To Irina Reyes." The name settled like dust, undeniable. My pulse jumped, but I stayed still. He adjusted his glasses. "To my granddaughter, Ina Reyes, I leave controlling interest in Reyes Development, along with $53.5 million in personal and investment assets." The words didn't land right away. They hovered, waiting for belief. Selina blinked twice. "What?" she whispered. My mother choked on air. My father leaned back as though struck in the chest. Still, no one looked at me. Thorne's voice remained steady. "This includes 62% ownership of all corporate entities, voting authority on the board, and full discretion over leadership and allocation." Selina shot to her feet, chair scraping wood. "There has to be some mistake." "There is no mistake," Thorne replied. "Your grandfather updated these provisions in person. They were witnessed and notarized. He was of sound mind. I hadn't moved, though my heart pounded like it might break through my ribs. He never said anything," Selina snapped. "He barely even liked her. He never mentioned her at all." Thorne closed the file gently. "He left a final note for the family," he said, lowering his gaze before reading the last sentence. This time there was no formality, only quiet resolve. She was the only one who arrived without a camera in hand. The room hushed again, but now the silence felt heavier, weighed down by something unexpected. Clarity. Selina looked stunned, her anger not yet surfaced, only disbelief. My mother's mouth hung slightly open, caught somewhere between denial and insult. My father studied me, really studied me, for the first time in years. His gaze didn't soften, but it didn't look away either. I wasn't thinking about money, the business, or power. My thoughts wandered to Grandpa's porch, to the worn book in his lap, and to the way he never rushed my silences. I thought of that Sunday I had never shared with anyone because I didn't need to. Selina finally broke the quiet. "This isn't fair." I looked at her calmly. "It wasn't meant to be." Mr. Thorne rose, gathering the papers. "There's one more thing Grayson wanted me to share. A personal letter. It's addressed to you, Irina." He handed me a sealed envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable. I slipped it into my coat pocket, not ready to open it in front of them, but knowing I eventually would. Later, in the small motel room I'd checked into the night before, a room with rattling heat and curtains that didn't quite meet, I sat on the bed with the envelope in my lap. I turned it over once, then again, tracing the familiar capital I of my name before breaking the seal. Inside were 3 folded pages. No date, no greeting. Just my name, followed by his words. "Ina, you never asked for anything, but you gave me what no one else could, time without condition. I watched you grow in the quiet corners of a house too loud to hear you." They measured love in applause. "You measured it in presence. That Sunday you came with tea. No speech, no performance. You never told them, and you didn't have to. That told me everything." I stopped, breath catching. The air thinned, as if he were in the room again, simply watching, never demanding. I changed my will the next week, not from spite. I love Selena too, in my way, but she never stayed unless there was a lens on her. She memorized the shape of my legacy, but not the time it took to build it. You once asked why I kept all those maps and journals. You didn't laugh when I said I wanted to know where things had been, so I could better guess where they might go. A smile slipped out. He had said that. I remembered thinking it strange that someone so practical still trusted in direction without certainty. I don't care what you do with the company. Keep it, sell it, rename it. What I leave you isn't concrete. It's trust. Trust in someone who shows up quietly without needing to be seen. That is the person who should hold the light when others forget where the switch is. The last lines leaned slower, wider, almost trembling. They'll say you don't deserve it. But I've seen what the world rewards and what it erases. I choose to remember you. Love, Grandpa. I folded the letter neatly, pressing the crease firm, then slipped it back into the envelope and tucked it beneath my pillow. What I felt wasn't validation. It was recognition, solid, grounding, like stepping onto earth after believing you'd been walking on glass. The next morning, I returned to the office for the final paperwork. Thorne had asked me to come alone. But when I walked in, they were already there. My parents and Selena, seated stiffly, like unwilling subjects in a family portrait. Selena rose instantly. You manipulated him, she said, each word clipped, rehearsed. He was old. He didn't know what he was doing. I didn't answer at once. I studied her instead. Polished makeup, glossy lips, grief hardened into anger. Finally, I said, I didn't need to prove anything. I just loved him. Her face twisted. Don't you dare make this about love. He was my grandfather too, I nodded. Then you know he hated cameras, my mother flinched. My father stared at the floor. Thorne stepped forward, voice calm. Mr. Reyes underwent 2 independent evaluations before amending his will. Both confirmed his full capacity. His instructions were intentional. That doesn't make it right, Selena snapped. No, I said. It makes it his choice. That broke my mother. Tears came quietly, not all at once. She turned her face away. My father touched her shoulder, but she didn't take his hand. Selena gathered her things with sharp, jerking movements. This isn't over, she said, though her voice faltered. You don't get to rewrite the family just because he's gone. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to prove. She walked out, heels striking hard against the hall. Thorne gave me a gentle nod, gesturing toward the office. Just a few signatures. I followed him inside, the letter pressed against my chest. I hadn't released it since last night. The storm had passed. I was still here, changed but unshaken. The drive to the cabin took under 2 hours. Snow drifted lightly along the roadside. Not enough to stick, but enough to whisper of winter. It had been years since I'd been there, but the route came back like muscle memory. The evergreens, the sagging mailbox, the crunch of gravel up the narrow drive. The key turned smoothly. Inside, nothing had moved. The pine table, the worn chair with its frayed blanket, the leaning row of books. Dust lingered, but time had not rewritten it. Above the fireplace sat a single photograph. I froze. 10-year-old me, cross-legged on the porch step, reading with my back against Grandpa's knee. His hand rested on my shoulder, both of us bent over the same page. I hadn't known the picture existed. Beside it lay a small leather journal. I opened it carefully. His writing leaned just slightly, deliberate. Urena was never allowed. That's how I knew I could trust her. The breath left me, sudden, as though I'd been holding it for years. I sank into the armchair with the journal in my lap. Silence filled the room, not heavy but whole. After a while, I stood, placed logs in the fireplace, and struck a match. The flame caught slowly, then spread, steady and sure. I watched it grow, listened to the wood settle. And for the first time in longer than I could measure, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. The room softened in warmth. I stayed there, the light steady across the floor, and felt the weight of the letter, the photograph, the journal. Not as a burden, but as a beginning.